Who controls your mind? The theme of this discussion. And it can be a very deceptive question when someone asks you, do you control your mind or someone else does? So most people's knee-jerk reaction would be that, of course I control my mind. Who else does? You know? We're not living in the 1984 scenario of George Orwell's 1984 of mind control. We live in freedom. We can express ourselves. We can think whatever we like, whatever we see fit. That's what most people would say, right? So who controls your mind? I do. Same question about your heart, your emotions. Who controls your feelings? Who controls your sensations? The senses. But if you step back a moment and start thinking about it, much more complicated than it sounds. Because let's say you're walking down the street and you're engrossed in something very important to you. And then you see something. You see some beautiful sight. You see a beautiful woman for a man. Or you see a beautiful man. Or you see, or you hear some exquisite piece of music. Or something tantalizes your smell, your taste. Then suddenly everything you've been involved in, can you maintain the focus? That's on a very basic level. When you take into account the world in which we live, that we're continuously being inundated with a media stream of information. You walk down the street here on Fifth Avenue. I mean, the colors, the lights, the advertisements, the windows. I mean, the billions spent on advertising is not waste of money. Is because it affects us, because it's very easy to manipulate people's senses and minds and hearts. When you start thinking about that, then now you're mentioning all the influences in our lives, the wanting to fit in, conformity, wanting to please our parents or our peers or others that we want to look good in their eyes. So it becomes a very big question, do you really control your mind? Do you control how you think? And you could even reverse the question. Is there anything in our mind and our feelings and in our senses that is really independent and driven by something from internal stimuli as opposed to external stimuli? What makes it even more fascinating or ironic is that, yes, in a world of 1984, Orwell's 1984, a world of totalitarian regime, where you're told what to think. You know, if you read the 1984, the Think, Speak, whatever, the whole thing, you know, war is peace, and peace is war, and love is hate, and hate is love. So there you could say, okay, it's a world that has all that type of influence. But in our world, we, as I said, ostensibly, it seems like we live in freedom. Freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And yet, in a way, the enslavement is even deeper because nobody is imposing it on us. It's not like someone is ordering you to sit and watch a film for hours upon hours, or will punish you and torture you like, what's the hero's name in 1984? I forgot already. Brian? Not Brian. Whatever his name was. Smith, right? Smith, I think. Where they torture you until you change and you think like they want you to think. Or what propaganda does. Look what happened in Nazi Germany. Or other. So there, at least you see very overtly that people are being indoctrinated. Look at what's going on tragically in the Muslim world. Especially recently, we hear about 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds. Impressionable, vulnerable, young children, innocent, and being trained. So we see what can be done when people impose themselves. But it's far more subliminal and far more, I would say, insidious if it's happening so-called in the free world. Because we don't feel, there's no one that's telling you, you must do this, you must think that. But just look at the hours we spend on television, internet, Facebook. How could that not be affecting us and impacting us? And when you go away on vacation sometimes to a place where there's no there's no technological communications, So initially, everybody who lives in the modern world has a certain type of withdrawal symptom, but then after a while, you almost feel like you're breathing fresh air. And at some point, you realize we become addicted to our toxic air. And breathing fresh air sounds like toxic. But then you realize that's really fresh, and what we have that we're used to is not. And it's very refreshing, but we are addicted. And we don't see it as a problem, we see it as freedom. That now you don't even have to get to a telephone. It's in your hand, you're mobile, you can communicate to anyone. Do you remember the days where you're like driving on a highway, you can't wait till there's a payphone so you can call somebody? That doesn't exist, that concept even. So on one hand, there's a freedom, but on the other hand, there's a very deep enslavement going on. And I'm not suggesting a conspiracy theory, because we're all a part of it. We all are participating in it willingly. But it's very hard to say that you really control your mind and your heart and your senses in the environment in which we live. And I think it's a worthwhile topic to discuss, because it really is about freeing yourself from your own being held hostage by things that you feel are actually emancipation. Now, this is not a fire and brimstone critique of technology and saying, hey, just drop it all. Because remember, technology is not what enslaves us. We enslave ourselves, and we allow that to affect us. At the end of the day, it comes down to who controls what enters and leaves your being, your system. Now, I can't resist it. Maybe it gets more and more as my grandchildren get older, and I see them more, and I play with them, but I can't resist always looking at children as being the best. I don't want to use specimen as a word, because I don't see them as that. That would be a harsh word to use. But they're the best models of what really is a healthy human being. Because they don't have the imprint of media and of modern society. They have the natural resources and tools that every human being is born with. I just see my youngest grandson now starting to go to, not the youngest, next to the youngest, starting to go to school. And it's exhilarating just to watch his excitement. And I say, so what happened in school? He's beginning to speak now. So he says, friends. He says, friends, in his little, broken words. And, by us friends, it's, we have a lot of friends. I have 50,000 Facebook friends that you never met. As they say, the most antisocial people are the people who created social media. They created a social media where you never have to meet the people that you're friends with. That's another discussion, just to give you some part of the paradoxes of our times. So he says, friends, and I see the excitement. Friends, he's making friends. Yeah, that's life, my friend. That's life. Relationships, love, sharing, communicating, even arguing, but in friendship. And it's so refreshing because we have so many other things going on. I'm sure all of us have some friends, and I hope you cherish it. But how often do we have the time just to spend eye-to-eye conversation without any distractions? It's a rare commodity today. So children remind us of what's real and what's fake, let's put it that way. And the world which we live with, all we call the information revolution, is also a information deluge, where there's so much being streamed to us that it's overwhelming. There's a website, I always find this funny, but it's a website called uselessinformation.com. I mean it. And it's very interesting stuff there, but it's all useless. Like, it has no value. It's just like this interesting trivia. Like how many million people walk down Fifth Avenue every day. So it's nice to know, but like someone said, who really cares? It's not a matter of life and death. Things like that. Check it out. I think it's useless information or useless knowledge. One of the two. You get the idea. I'm not exaggerating. There is a website like that. I haven't gone there in a long time. I've been looking for useful information. When after my book was published, Toward a Meaningful Life, someone said to me, I think you should publish a sequel called Toward a Meaningless Life. He says that'll be a lot bigger bestseller, because a lot of people I saw someone sent me a cartoon today. What was it called? He says, I'm the leader of the greatest nation on earth. What nation is that? Procrastination. Okay, so we have all these humor and jokes, but it's actually quite tragic as well. I think it's a great topic to talk about, especially we're in this month of Elul, the last Hebrew month of the year, which is a month of Cheshbon and Nefesh, which is a month of accountability and accounting. And what better way to prepare for a new year like maybe cleaning our hard drives and a new slate so we can like start anew. And starting anew means not just I want things to be new, it means that you do something about it. Because as I always say, what do they say? Insanity is doing the same thing and expecting different results. So you do the same thing, what do you think you're going to get? You're going to get, the new year will come, but you're not going to be renewed by it. Or the way I like to prefer putting it is that if you think what you thought, then you say what you said, you do what you did, what are you going to have? What you had. That's a mathematical certainty. Because if you do everything the same way, you're going to get the same results, right? So the way to really prepare is to look at ourselves and say, who's in control? And you begin by the question. Because if you don't ask the question and convince yourself that everything is cool, that not necessarily is going to get you anywhere. In essence, you can really say all of Judaism, all of Torah, all of any transcendent system, I don't know if system is the right word, but any transcendent movement is about this question. Who controls your life? Is it coming from within, generated from within, or is it generated from without? You can say Abraham, who may be the first documented seeker. In the Bible, close to 3,800 years ago, a man grew up in a very affluent home of an idol manufacturer. He was an industrialist. He was an entrepreneur. Idols work that. I mean, today you also have different idols. They may not be today physical idols. People sell you whatever it is that make you happy for the moment. And Abraham, from the young age, recognized that this is not. This is just a scam. Even though, as I said, he lived in a privileged home. His father was making a lot of money on other people's sorrows. And then finally he realized that this pagan society in which he grew up in, something fundamentally wrong. That cannot be real, where people just worship each other and worship their own needs and so on. And he went to search for, as I said, perhaps the first documented search for reality. You can call it God, call it whatever name you want to call it, but it's something more than human, something beyond us. That's what he went to look for. Now, how do you look for something beyond you when you're a part of the you? How do you go beyond? How do you find a solution to a problem that's made by the same world that created the problem is not going to give you the solution? They say no system can correct itself. You need a correction from outside the system. The problem that's created by a system cannot be corrected by that system. So he went seeking. And first he went to the meadows and to nature, which is obviously the natural place to go. He looked up into the heavens, celestial bodies, the sun and the moon, like we all do. We raise our eyes to heaven to see what's up there. Curiosity, what's going on? And he realized as much as great as all the celestial cosmos are, it's still part of the same reality that we have down here. It's just larger. And it's vaster, and it's less, it's more exotic, it's more mysterious. But still, he recognized there must be something beyond. Ultimately, what he came to discover, which is fascinating, was that his search was based on the wrong premise. I'm searching for reality. Reality should be searching for me. How could the part define the whole? He's a part. He understood he's a part. How can a part ever fathom the whole? And he realized that the only way to really experience it is by doing the opposite of searching, which is letting go. Get your ego out of the way. Get your interests out of the way. Get even your drive to know what reality is out of the way, and it'll emerge. He discovered the essence of real control, which is it's never from outside. It's always from within. What that means that as long as you allow forces, whether it's the pagan community or environment you lived in, or people or other physical objects to be the forces that define your life, that cannot be reality. Reality has to be something that you let go, you release, and then truths emerge. A truth emerges, and ultimately the truth of God, the truth of reality. The reason I interchange God and reality, because the language is always a key. The word reality everybody can relate to. The word God, people right away shrink away, always talking about God again, that type of thing. But I'm talking among friends here, captive audience, hopefully. Or maybe sometimes you don't have a captive audience online, I don't know. But bottom line is that I think we all can relate to this concept, Truth, the control begins, real control is when it comes from within. And that's the ultimate paradox. That the more you look for it, the more you try to hold it and grab it and control it, the less you can really experience it. So it's like someone says to you, how do you experience music? You can't go grab music. You play the music, you put a headset on, or you just allow yourself to be absorbed in the sound. You're absorbed in the sound, just like you're submerged in water. There's something about you being submerged in something greater than yourself that allows you to experience it. Someone wants to own it or control it, then it's good for a physical commodity, a loaf of bread, $1, $1,000, $1 million. Objects you can control, you can own. But in order to really experience the truth, you have to let go. Now that's a simple statement, but it's hard to do because some of us are afraid to let go. We become so accustomed to holding on to things and hoarding, and we think that's our security blankets, our comfort zones. So it takes a lot of courage. Abraham, of course, was a man that was unique and had the courage to really allow him to leave everything. He dropped his family, he dropped his community, and he was all alone. But through his aloneness, he discovered how to master his own mind. And it actually says that he controlled his senses. That even when there was a sound, he was able to control that he shouldn't hear the sound. It's ultimately what people call today the most meditative type of state, where you literally can become so, insulate yourself from all outside stimuli. Most people cannot do that. That takes a lot of work and effort. I can give you a little taste of it in my own experience when I worked in the years that I memorized the Rebbe's words, called a choser in the lingo, Hasidic lingo, which meant listening for hours on end, Shabbat and holidays, when no tape recorders, no notes were taken, no tape recorders were used, no recordings, and you had to just absorb it in your mind and then reconstruct it after the Shabbat. So how do you do a thing like that? So I've talked about this a number of times, but one key thing is completely submerging yourself in what is being said. You can't be conscious of yourself. You can't say, I'm going to now hear and understand it all. As soon as you say that, it's over with. It's literally like I just said with music. Just let go. Shut yourself down. Shut down your senses. And let whatever's experiencing become part of you. And I'm sure you all have experiences like this in love, in intimacy, in anything that's real. That's really what it comes down to. It's ultimately actually the celebration of vulnerability. Where most people think vulnerability is like a weakness. I'm vulnerable, I can be taken advantage of. Can I trust? The truth is, the most powerful experience is when you can celebrate your vulnerability because you're being absorbed by something that's greater than you are. And you allow it. And that creates a whole different level of experience. Some people call it being in the zone. Writers experience it, artists experience it, athletes experience it. It's where you stop being conscious of yourself and there's no longer a subject and an object. There's no longer a duality. You and the experience are one. So it's like someone asks, what does it feel like getting wet? So dry things can talk about getting wet. Why? Because you're dry and then you put your hand in water, so it gets wet. What happens if I ask this question? Can water get wet? Interesting, right? Does water get wet? And do fish get wet? The answer is no, because water is wetness. It's a state of being. So there's a verb and there's a noun. Some say women experience love like a noun, state of being, and men experience it like a verb, like an action. So an action means there's two things going on. There's you and there's the experience. But when they dissolve into one, where the subject and the object become one, there's no self-consciousness, then you know you're in the experience itself. So going back to the topic, which is obviously connected to this, control, we do live in a world where forces outside of us control us. We're not Abrahams, but we could be. And that's, of course, the topic that we're addressing. But we have to realize, by contrast, the difference. One person is one that really controls what goes into their minds and hearts and souls, what goes in, what comes out, and another does not. Simple as that. Why don't we? Because we are like a ship a lost ship at sea. Whatever the waves, the drifts, the tides go, that's how you're dragged. You don't have that solid inner self that's defining what I should be doing or what not. Now, we have plenty of examples for this, even in the material world. You find, for example, very single-minded, focused business people. You'll see that people, everything that they look at in the world is about their business. They like to look, where's my next opportunity? Nothing distracts them. This is just a small example, not necessarily a good example, but it's an example of where you become so single-focused that almost you don't hear anything except if it's what it means for me. I'm just using an example just to give a taste of this type of experience. Obviously, we're talking about having a transcendent experience, not about me. But that's the same type of absolute focus. So once you have that focus, it becomes the driving engine. It's like the hub that connects everything else. I mean, I saw, for example, my teacher, our teacher, the Rabbi, my mentor, he was this way, 24/7. You saw a man on a mission. There was never distraction. Nothing could distract him. Absolutely nothing. And even if something did, he turned that also into something that became part of his calling. And that's people who, of course, have a higher calling and are in touch with it, and they see their entire lives. They're on a mission. That's simple as that. They don't have two agendas. That's their agenda, to fulfill their calling. Most of us, I would say most, even everyone, we have many different compartmentalized, fragmented activities going on. Here we're on vacation, here we're traveling, here we're home. We have our religious experience, our transcendent experience, our mundane experiences. You make a list of things, bunch of fragments. It's directly connected to the same idea. That means that your stimulation is coming not from an inner place that connects it all. It's coming from outer places that are making different demands. You ask most people, they say, what can I do? All the expectations and the demands that people around me are. My family demanding things, my bosses demanding things, my clients are demanding things, society demands things, my friends want things, everybody wants something. And I don't mean want that they come lining up, here, give me something. There's that pressure that you have to deliver. You have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do that. And at some point you start saying, who's in control? Yeah. Do I have any say about this? Or you just simply resign yourself. Some people say, listen, just accept it. You're not in control of your destiny, and just follow what everyone, the people that love you, tell you to do. Which I'm not suggesting there isn't some value to that it's not all about you and you do have to serve. But if you lose yourself in the process, then it becomes like, okay, fine, at least you may be doing good things, but it's not coming from an internal place. But if you make a deliberate decision that, I have a mission in my life, and part of that mission is to help people serve their needs, etc., etc., it's a very different story. So at the end of the day, most of us are really not in control. Let's be honest. And it's a hard thing to acknowledge. And that's why we mask it with all kinds of other methods. Like the guy that told me about someone, says he hides his ignorance with his arrogance. We hide our lack of control with seemingly control and over-control. That's why you have people very controlling, and they're very dominant, and they're very adamant and aggressive. Usually it's coming from someone who doesn't have that much control, and that's how they're exercising it. So it looks like it's control, like a control freak, but in truth it may be someone who's absolutely, their life is out of control, so they're overcompensating by just, saying it has to be this way, it has to be that way. It's a good exercise. There's a thing called a backseat driver. I'll just use an innocent, almost harmless example. Backseat driver. Someone's driving, they're always telling them, that backseat driver, by the way, doesn't mean you have to sit in the back seat. You could be in the front seat and also be a backseat driver, just for the record. Now, what's going on with that? Think about the phenomenon. So ostensibly the person would say very simple. If the driver is not really a good driver, he could get into an accident. Someone has to tell him, there's a car in front of here, make a turn here, you're missing that, the red light, turn green, etc., etc. So in other words, I don't trust the driver, but I know how to do it. Is that really the only factor? You think there are plenty secure people who may be even better drivers than the actual guy driving by the steering wheel, and they don't necessarily have to do that. So you can make the argument people who have to exercise control is they're compensating for their own stuff. I mean, I'm not saying it's always the case. Just like they say, paranoia, just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean no one wants to get me. Just because I'm a backstreet driver doesn't mean I'm not in control of my life. I'm not suggesting it's the only reason, but it could be a reason. So a lot of times what we do is overcompensate. And it's true, you see that. You see people who get very frustrated for years. So how many times have I heard this? People tell me, For years I was silenced. For years I was told what to do. I acquiesced. I came to please everybody. And now it's my turn. I am now no longer pleasing anybody. I am now 20 years. I served other people's needs. Now I'm serving my own needs. I've become a selfish person. I need 20 years to fix the 20 years that was stolen from me. I've heard this from people. Not everyone articulates it quite that way, but you can see sometimes in behavior. What do you say to a person like that? Let's say it's true. Let's, for argument's sake, it's true. A person growing up in a home, when always served, they always became like their surrogate mother and had to do things because their parents were not available, and you become a life of completely taking care of other people's needs, caretakers, pleasers, and your needs were never taken care of. You do have this phenomenon. It's not that rare. So how does a person grow out of that? So it seems logical. The next step would be, okay, now that you're free of that, now take care of your own needs. That's not necessarily the solution, because your drive to take care of your own needs could be coming from the same place that deprived you of your needs. You're just now affected in a different way. So it's it's still driven by what you were deprived of. The way to really get control is not to remain a pleaser, is to start figuring out what you want. And maybe what you want does not have to go to the other extreme. It could include helping someone else. And not saying, since I helped everybody for 20 years, now I'm not going to help anybody for 20 years. If you think about it, it doesn't make that much sense. Help people for the right reason. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, is what I'm saying. So to go back to this theme here, the idea of control really comes down to an inner sense of purpose that is your driving force. You have that, then you can define what will stimulate you, because you will enter that which is relevant to you, you'll allow to stimulate you. That which is irrelevant, you will not allow in. But if you don't have that sense, why shouldn't you be driven by many different directions? I'm sure tests have been done, and we see this all the time. I mean, I see sometimes myself doing it, and I'm really disturbed actually by it. You're in the middle of a job, you're doing some work, but it's a little hard. So you have this writer's block, or whatever block you have. So you go to another. You're going to check I'm going to check my emails. So far, that's my excuse. Let me check my emails. Then I'm going to go get a drink, and then I'm going to check a website. And one website takes you to another website. And suddenly the excuse would be multitasking, but really you're not multitasking. You're simply all over the place, avoiding what you should be doing. Now we all do this. I'm not suggesting this is a great crime. It's a human nature. But if you think about it, what we're really doing is, because of lack of that type of complete focus. And again, I'm not addressing time. We all need to take time out. You can't always be 100,000% focused. The times you take out, you relax, you do other things. Sometimes you do step away and come back to a project. Obviously, that is a good thing to do. But I'm talking about where it becomes the dominant feature is that you're constantly distracted one thing to the next. And suddenly I say to myself, okay, why am I on this website suddenly? I know it's interesting, but what does it have to do with what I was doing? It's just a great way to just avoid what I have to get done. So what happens is, it's very clear. When it's not coming from within, everything around you is going to start defining. Okay, so we resume. Where was I? Control. Okay, so we live in this world where there's so much going on. So where did one begin? One begins is the practical thing I would suggest is you wake up tomorrow morning, and before you check your texting, your texts and the emails that you may have tragically missed during the hours of your sleep, you should say Moda Ani Lefanecha Melech V'Kayom Shechazarta B'Nishmosi B'Chem L'Rabba Munatecha. I know I said that in Hebrew. I'll translate. You should say, "Thank you for returning my soul to me." Let's start with that. There's a little more in that phrase, but that's the first step. What does that mean? It means that you're acknowledging that everything begins from the soul within you, not from the forces outside of you. If you think about it, sleep itself, of course, is a great mystery. And the mystery of sleep, we may never understand, but one thing we know, that something happens that we wake up in the morning refreshed, hopefully. So the first thing, you have an opportunity. It's like a new day. It's like a new life. Because even though sleep is not death, but it's the 1/60th of death, it is a form of rejuvenation. Your soul in some way has gone back, the way the Medrash puts it, the soul goes back to refresh itself, to rejuvenate itself from the wellsprings, from its spiritual wellsprings. So you wake up in the morning, you have a new opportunity. What's your opportunity? What is going to control your life? When you first focus on that soul within, like a type of meditation, so you're recognizing that everything begins with your soul, not with your body and not with your experiences. You haven't gone to work yet, you haven't even eaten breakfast yet, you haven't done any real interaction with anyone. So as soon as you wake up, that cognizance, not just as a lip service, I'm talking about truly being cognizant, aware of a force inside of you that's not so visible, because your heart, you can tell your heart beats, but your soul doesn't really beat. But if you stop everything, I mentioned before Abraham, you shut off your senses. And this is the real key part to it. You shut off your senses, which means, number one, imagine you close your eyes, you close your ears, you taste, touch, and smell. And say modani in that context. You, in a sense, are not letting outer stimulation affect you. That's when your soul will speak to you. Because what are you left with when you do all that? By the Shema, we close our eyes. We cover our eyes. Because we want to get beyond the visual that can distract us. Now we'll get back to we live in a world where there are senses, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but you first have to get to a suprasensory place. That's the key. Everybody here is able to do that. You just need willpower and just do it. That's sheftim v'shaitim. You're placing gatekeepers. The first place to begin is the beginning of the day. It's much harder to do it once you're already in the middle of the whole rush hour of life. Right when you wake up, it's in your control. You could say, I'm allowing my gatekeepers to define, the first thing is I have a soul. Then the next step is that soul will then now manifest in the rest of me, which is you become aware that it's giving you a new day. You wake up, whatever your regimen may be. You exercise, you shower, breakfast, coffee. It doesn't really matter what order it is. But what you've done, most importantly, is you've let it come from within instead of from without. Look how many exercises are done today in meditation or in mindfulness or in yoga. Breathing. You see, all the breathing exercises come down to one thing. It's like taking in something, closing your eyes, breathing in. Now, breath in Hebrew, neshima, comes from the same word as neshama, as soul. Soul and breath, because the breath of God, that the Bible puts it this way. God breathed into us, essentially imbuing us with the breath of the divine breath, which is the essence of what your soul is. So are you a body that happens to have a spirit, or are you a spirit that happens to be encased in a body? Which is it? That's the key thing. Now, we all begin with the latter. We all see ourselves with the former. We all see ourselves as a body, and I happen to have a soul inside me, and I'm looking for what it is. But those that become truly in touch internally work the other way around. They are a soul that is encased inside of a structure called a body. It's like first comes the product, then comes the package. Form follows function. Body follows soul. Purpose, implementation follows purpose. So the body then becomes, and all the bodily experiences, including the stimulation of the senses and the mind, are really there to satisfy, nourish, nurture the soul. Now, people who are truly soulful people feel this way almost all day, if not all day. For the rest of us, we have to begin somewhere, so you begin in the morning. And then you try to infuse different components of your day with that type of awareness. So then, let's say after you get out of the house, you're walking down the street, you're commuting, you see something very attractive. You can try. Say, I'm very attracted to that. But let me ask myself the question, does it fit, the gatekeeper should ask the question, does it fit the agenda of my soul that I acknowledged this morning? To expect that we'll be able to have that type of self-control, I'm not suggesting throughout, but a few times a day you can ask yourself that question. Someone provokes you, as I mentioned before. You can stop, your gatekeeper can stop you and say, okay, how am I reacting to this? It's almost like out-of-body experience of like looking at yourself as an outsider would. But you can only do that if you have that type of inner sense of strength. That's why I suggested that morning prayer or morning meditation, whatever you want to call it. Now, if you do this every morning and then you take a few events every day, 2, 3, you'll start realizing that you have started getting a different control over your life, because it means you've begun the process. As I said, don't think of it as cold turkey, you got to change everything. Because if you're able to 2, 3 times a day stop yourself and look at myself, what's controlling what? Is there a gatekeeper here at the walls, at the gates of my life, of my eyes, my ears, my nose, etc., in the mouth? Then you start recognizing you're able to. Because we're so accustomed to the way we live our lives, it's very hard to imagine. Most people say, it's impossible. What are you talking about? How can I control what comes in and out of my life? Try it out. The suggestion I make is completely doable. You can begin tomorrow morning. You don't need any introductions. You don't need to go buy manuals. You don't need any warm-ups. Just do it. And then try it out a few times a day. You're not going to catch yourself all the time. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to definitely be impulsive. We are. That's how we are. We're impulsive creatures. All you need is a few times to press on the brakes. And you'll see it'll become easier as it goes. Because you suddenly see, hey, I can do a lot more than I think I can do. Most people have no clue how much power they have. Because they're so accustomed to what's going on, they think that's the only thing, that's my only reality. It's absolutely not true. And wherever you turn, any good book, any good teacher, any good direction, any religion, any spirituality is all going to come down to this. Can you look at yourself in this fashion and see that you're capable of more than you think you are? Which, of course, also requires a humility. Slowly you start doing this, what happens is you start living an inside-out life instead of an outside-in life. That's what it comes down to. So the outer stimuli I talked before is an outside-in life, which is really where most of us are at. An inside-out life is a very different one. But you can't just suddenly transform one to the next. That's why it has to be done in steps. If you want to think about it, Shabbat. You tell me, what is Shabbat about at the end of the day, Shabbos? It asks us not to be involved in material work. A day different than 6 days of the week. Whatever way, different meaning you're not involved in the same thing. It's essentially like a fresh start. It's going into a more soulful place that's not that involved in shopping and material work and all the labor that we do 6 days of the work week. It's a day, not just relaxation, let's just relax and sit on a beach, but also a soulful day. It's not a day of doing nothing, it's a day of going away from material activity to spiritual activity. And what is spiritual activity at the end of the day? Is, again, from the inside out. You sit with family, you light, before Shabbat begins, candles, flames, you sing songs. Hopefully it's harmonious, warm environment. It's conducive to a soulful experience. Shabbat be done correctly, it's the greatest gift. Who would not want to have a day in the week after 6 days of this pressure and all that demands on us? It's a day literally where, yes, you're not looking for outer stimulation, you're looking for inner stimulation. There's an interesting medrash that says, the Talmud says, there are 39 types of labor you're not supposed to do on Shabbat. But the expression, as usually cryptic as it is, as the Talmudic cryptic way of saying it is, 40 types of labor minus 1 you're not supposed to do on Shabbat. Now tell me, why would anyone say 40 minus 1? It takes more words, just say 39. 40 minus 1 is 39, am I right? You don't need to be an accountant to know that. Okay. So the Medrash says, you know why? Because there really are 40 types of work. The 40th is spiritual work. So the Talmud is saying 40 minus 1 you're not supposed to be doing, but the 1 you should be doing. And that 1 is the 40th, like the 40th gate of Bina, of understanding. And what is that? Malechesh Shemayim, which means spiritual, heavenly type of work. Prayer, study, love, communicating with your love, children, family, and so on. So there is different types of work. It's just different types of work. Like the Talmud says, a human being was created to be to toil. What kind of toil? So it says amal malach. There's the toil of work, hard labor. There's amal sicha, the toil of prayer, when you emote, and there's amal Torah, the toil of studying, using your mind. So Shabbat. Take one more. I gave the example. I said so far, Modani, Shabbat. The third thing I want to mention is, yes, Torah study. Torah study is an interesting experience. When you read many books, I mentioned before, different subjects, it usually has some utilitarian value. It's like you're reading it or learning about it in order to know how to do something better. I can't say completely the case, because there are definitely times we read books just for the pleasure of reading. We're sometimes curious about information, even though it may not come to use. But in some way or other, it's somewhat connected to life as we know it on this earth. Torah study, especially spiritual Torah study, is all about the soul. It's about understanding things that are not of this world, otherworldly. And that again is yet another way of transcending what I talked before about the outer stimuli. Because when you're able to nourish and get someone to speak about soulful matters, let's say you start having a conversation, what do you really believe in? Why are we here? What does it mean? What mark are we going to leave in this universe? As soon as you ask those questions, you have a conversation that is not controlled by outer stimuli, because then it makes no, because that's not affected by the things we see or hear or taste, touch, and smell. It's a conversation about what are you about. I always mention that someone asks you, who are you? They give you their business card. It's a perfect example of outer stimuli. They're giving you what you do. Your business card is what you do, not who you are. Who you are is from within. So having conversations like that with our children at the table in the morning before they go to sleep is the healthiest way of teaching someone to think from the inside out. Who am I? And then what do I do? Instead of what do I do and then figure out how the I fits into that. Many of us are products of our work, are products of our environment, products of others. When you ask yourself, okay, and who am I? I don't really know. No one ever cared about who I am. I was always serving something or providing something. So that's the third thing, besides the two I've mentioned, Modani, the morning. Number two, the one about Shabbat. And finally here, the conversations that are about from the inside out. Now, an interesting thing is this. We experience everything from the outside in except one thing, ourselves. Like if you want to know what I feel like, my feelings, either I have to tell them to you or you have to read them on my face or my body language. We look at everything around us from the outside in. We look at the outside and we try to figure out what's going on within. Right? You meet someone. You want to know what's inside them. When you think of yourself, it's the other way around. You don't need to look in the mirror to know whether you're in a bad mood. You feel it. From the within, inside out. But the sad thing is then we become controlled by the outside. So even though an inside-out person is suddenly behaving like an outside-in person. Like the joke goes, he says, so what mood should I be in today? You're asking me what mood you should be in. Why don't you tell me what mood you're in? You start becoming like different masks we wear to satisfy different people in different situations. And at some point someone says, and who are you like without all your masks? And without your camouflage and masquerading? Not so easy to answer if you've been masquerading for so long. I don't know who said this, but they say, I've been wearing masks my entire life. I don't even know what's behind the mask. And you become a product of your own armor. Some of us protect ourselves so well because we're afraid of being hurt. We have no trust. So we have to create layers and layers and layers of armor. And at some point you become your armor. You become your defense mechanisms. How sad is that? Instead of defense mechanisms there to protect you, you've become lost in your defense. All it is defense mechanism. It's like someone's fighting a warrior, fighting a battle their entire life. They forgot that there's a person beyond the battler. I've been fighting so many wars. I don't know anything but how to fight a war. So we, my friends, have the ability to control our own domain, to be the captain of our own ship. But you have to respect yourself. Really respect yourself to the point that you should want to be so. I find a lot of people just don't respect themselves enough to fight for themselves. I know it sounds weird because what's the first thing we all want to do is self-preservation. But many of us do not really. We self-preserve, but not in healthy ways. A healthy self-preservation is someone who takes control of their life. As I said, who's the strong person? One who controls their inclinations, their expressions. There's no greater thing for a person that, imagine one day you learn that which upset you yesterday doesn't upset you anymore. Not because you become insensitive and what's the word? Your threshold for pain has grown, but because you become a greater person. Small petty things don't bother you that much. That's control. That's achieving greatness. Because what you're achieving is a state and ability to go beyond who you've been in the past. So in our day and age, the challenge is very deep because of all that is coming our way, and everybody's selling something. I'm even feeling, even as I speak here, on Facebook, on YouTube, with all the, so I'm talking about how technology can enslave us using technology. So I'm wondering whether this is another form of enslavement or not. I would say not, because I'm trying to explain that the whole purpose of it is not, that we should be able to choose. We should be able to choose and decide what's going to control, what enters our homes, what doesn't enter our home. And home is a good example. Those of us that are parents and built homes, it's a very big thing. What do you allow into your home? What don't you allow? There's some things that we don't want in our home that defile our homes, that are impure. We don't want ourselves to be exposed. We don't want our children to be exposed. You control that. That's what the role of a gatekeeper is. The same thing is with ourselves, the inner home of our lives, of our souls. Because as I mentioned, the expression is, the Talmud Nedarim says, that a human being, the body, is like a small city. But who's controlling this city? That's what we have to ask ourselves. And I have no question, if we ask ourselves this question, they say the question of a wise person is half an answer. So there you have, in simple one verse, in this week's chapter, a tremendous lesson about appointing gatekeepers. And I just thinking about it, imagine we told this to our children when they're young age. You're gatekeepers. A lot of people ask the question, how can I make sure my children are protected from predators, molesters, and other users and so on? What do I tell them? Do I tell them, never talk to strangers? We know that it doesn't always help. I was just thinking that maybe the way to talk about it is not in a negative way, in a positive way. Use the verse in this week's Torah. We all have we all have cities. The cities are pure places, and we have gates. The gates are the two eyes, and your two ears, your nostrils, and your mouth. Build gatekeepers. Your dignity, your personality should dictate what enters your life, what doesn't. Who you should speak to, who you shouldn't speak to. And no one else can control your gates. No one else should control your gates but you. It's a very positive way to explain this. You have a friend that's a bully, a friend that's behaving inappropriately. You don't need to let them into your life. Like, everybody, all the healers say, how much energy are we investing in the anger and the wish for vengeance for people who have hurt us? Your real estate, the valuable real estate of your mind, is occupied often with all the grievances we have. They may be justified grievances, but at the end of the day, they're toxic. They're controlling your life. So it's not just what happened that hurt you. It continues to control your life because it dominates your psyche. Why would you allow such a thing to be? Don't you realize you're participating in the abuse when you allow the abuser to continue to occupy your life? Freedom is when you can free yourself. That has nothing to do. That person should get their due, that's a separate story, but you don't have to be consumed with it. Gatekeepers, wherever you turn, think about yourself as a sacred entity, and God blessed you and said, I've endowed you with the power, I've given you the responsibility to be a gatekeeper of yourself. Do your job. A gatekeeper is supposed to be alert, supposed to be awake. Are you doing the job? So that's all one verse teaches us these lessons. Really, it's about being conscientious and sensitive to ourselves, and obviously to others as well. And it's a tremendous way, I think, to teach our children as well to have that type of self-control. Now, is this, again, to transform everything in a moment? That's not our job. Our job is to start the process. It's always the direction you're going. I always tell couples who question whether they're compatible, they say, I'm more spiritual than her, or she's more spiritual than me, or more religious, or whatever it may be. And so there are no two people on earth that are going to be exactly alike. That's ridiculous. It doesn't exist. What you have to ask yourself the question, which is I always say, it's not whether you're both in the same place. Are you both going in the same direction? So if one person is going like this, and the other person is maybe here, but if they're going this way, so one person could be at the top of the mountain now, and the other person at the bottom of the mountain, but if one is headed down and the other one's headed up, that's just a matter of time. So you always want to know the direction that people are going. I'm not sure who coined this expression. They say people don't change. All they do is change direction. So we change direction, which makes it a lot more hopeful, because can I really change? Can a leopard change its spots, or a tiger its stripes? That's the two expressions, right? So change is not a simple matter. And so maybe a discussion for another time what change really means. But changing direction means you don't change fundamental part of you change what direction it's going. And in that sense, instead of outer stimuli being the forces that control me, I control the outer stimuli. So the Talmud does say that Abraham was able to control his five senses. And many people who read it say, okay, that's the miracle. Abraham, who could be like Abraham? But when you think about it, it's not that simple. You see this with athletes, with people who excel, I mentioned it earlier, in their area. When they get in the zone, they literally almost can control their senses. You sometimes see these sports. See, like let's use tennis, the U.S. Open now, right? In tennis. And even if you're watching it, it's a nail biter, down to the last point. And you imagine, how's the guy serving without his hands trembling or shaking? And when you ask people, they say, because at some point the experience and the training, you come to a point, even when you're under fire, you have that composure. You have ability, a superhuman ability to control your senses and not be distracted. You see that type of focus happens when we really matter. It matters to us. God forbid, I don't want to use a negative example, God forbid a parent sees a child in a burning building. They're not going to be distracted suddenly by some type of attractive sight somewhere. They're focused to save that child's life. They'll do whatever it takes. Because you suddenly have that laser beam focus that puts everything aside. So it's not like we're not capable of having it. It's just that we're lackadaisical, is the word. We're like loose. Hey, why not? Here, there. But if you take yourself seriously, you take your mission seriously, then there's that type of focus. So no one should say they are not capable. We're all capable. We have to just find the moments that we exercise it and then slowly spread them through our lives. So that, my friends, is the story of Sheftim and the story of who controls your mind. I would say most of us do not control our minds or our hearts or our stimulation, but we could by changing the direction, changing the arrow from going from outside in to inside out. If you look yourself at whoever you're going to meet, there's something for you to accomplish in that meeting. It's very different than, okay, I meet that person, whatever they want to do, let's see, they'll stimulate me. But if you look at it in a sense where that person's come your way in order for you to fulfill something, that changes the whole perspective. Okay. So with that said, we're in the month of El, as I mentioned, the last month of the Hebrew year, where we wish each other a happy new year, a blessed year, health, and nachas from each other, from everyone around us. But in this context, of course, in the month of accounting, Cheshbon and Nefesh, we make an accounting. So the first place in accounting is to check out your gatekeepers. What's going on? Are they asleep on the job? Are they? Did they doze off? Are they awake and alert? That's the first question we have to ask ourselves. And here are our eyes, 2 gates, our ears, another 2, our nostrils and our mouths. 7 gates right here in this part of your body, that really control most of what goes in and out, maybe everything almost. Because everything has to go through those cavities. And it's up to us to be the gatekeepers, the judges and the gatekeepers. So God bless us all with a very good year. We continue our journey every Wednesday, 8:15 approximately, using all these technologies. I apologize for the little glitch we had here. So I know the Facebook was rolling the whole time. I think the other one I have to check what happened exactly. And with that, everyone have a pleasant week, a good week. I know Labor Day was Monday. I always find that irony that on Labor Day is the day when you don't do any labor. But maybe, as I said, Arboy Malachas Chasar Achas, that is the 40th type of labor, which is Malachas Shamayim, spiritual work. I don't think anybody Labor Day really thought about spiritual work. I happened to be in the Holy Land on Labor Day, so I didn't participate in the festivities on my block on Eastern Parkway. But I will say that I bring the warm regards from the Holy Land, the place where heaven meets earth. And may we all, as I said, be blessed with a beautiful week. If any way I could be of help or a Meaningful Life Center, please be in touch with us. Thank you very much. That's when the plug went out. The plug? Was the plug? How's the thumb?